Hi, welcome back to Broken and Brilliant. I'm Carrie O'Toole with Carrie O'Toole Ministries. And today I'm really excited to welcome JT Olson to the program. Hi, JT.
Hello.
Hey, I'm so glad to have you. We met, I was trying to think how long ago it was, probably 5 or 6 years, maybe,
Yeah.
in Seattle
Yeah.
at a conference, an adoption conference. And I think we rode an elevator together, and then you gave me a ride, if I believe. Am I correct there?
I think I remember something like that. Yes.
Or I gave you a ride or something. Anyway, we were both going over to the conference, and one of us didn't have a car, so the other one
Yeah.
helped out. So we met
Yes.
there, and then we reconnected again just this spring at a conference in Kansas City, and got to know each other a little bit better. And then I heard your talk. You shared your story, and it was just so intriguing. And I really wanted to see if you'd be willing to come on and kind of give us a condensed version of that talk. And you agreed. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's an honor. I love to tell the story of both hands because it needs to be told.
Yeah. And so the story is about your organization called Both Hands, correct?
Yep.
So I'll let you just take it. Start where you want to start, and I'll ask questions if I feel like we need to know more.
Well, I mean, it's always interesting whenever I tell people what I do, because I say, well, I help families raise money for adoptions, and we do it by working on a widow's house. And they always look at me real polite, and they can't, but you can see this glaze in their eye that they're thinking, I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about.
Well, that's what I felt when we were talking together in Kansas City. I'm like, wait a minute, these two things, how do they go together? But they
Well,
do.
well, and I have found the best way to explain how this works and to make it all make sense very quickly is to tell how it happened. I mean, I was on the local board of Bethany Christian Services here in Nashville. And one year they told me I was in charge of the fundraiser, and I chose to do a golf fundraiser. And it was a kind where you invite people in and, everyone sends letters out and says, would you sponsor me while I golf? So I sent my letters out, and I had a buddy who I was in a Bible study with. He sends my letter back to me, does not include a check. He just took a magic marker and he scribbled across my letter. He said, JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you, but you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money. Well, I mean, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but at the same time, I thought, man, that's a good idea, And
Pretty blunt.
yeah, well, and I called him a couple of days later, and we talked about it and laughed about it, and he still didn't give me any money. But the idea just never left me. Whenever I saw a 5K or a golf tournament happening after that, I just kept thinking, if all those people were working on a widow's house, would it be better? Would it be more impactful, powerful? I don't know. I just
But
didn't
see,
have the orphan part figured out.
even as you say that, JT, I'm thinking, okay, but if you're working on a widow's house, then how are you raising money for this other thing? You're helping the one, but how are you helping both?
Well, and that's the sending letters out part. Like when I sent letters out to say sponsor while I golf, people would send money and say, okay, I'll sponsor you for $1 a hole, or $20 a hole, whatever, and that's the letters are the important part of it. But I didn't have any of that figured out until a couple years later. I'm in church and run into a good friend. I hadn't seen him in a couple months. And I just said, hey, Don, what's up? And he says, I'm adopting 4 kids from Moldova. And, he's already got 3 kids at home. And I said, what happened? and he said, I went on a mission, excuse me, with Sweet Sleep, delivering beds to orphanages in Moldova, and fell in love with this little boy, George, and started the adoption process when we got home and found out George has 3 siblings. And he says, we're not going to break up the siblings. And immediately that took me back to when I was 12 years old, living on a farm in northeastern Iowa. I remember one weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary. And us kids were kind of farmed out to different places. And I remember Saturday night, or we were being brought home, the neighbors dropped me and one of my brothers off because mom and dad were coming home, and I'd played in the barn all day. So I was dirty. I had to go in the basement to change. He went in the front door. But I remember sitting in our basement, bending over, unlacing my boots, and my brother came down the basement stairs. I looked up at him and I I said, are mom and dad home? And he looked at me and he said, mom and dad are dead. And I looked at him shocked and I said, what? And he said, mom and dad are dead. They were killed in a car accident an hour ago. And he turned around and walked upstairs. Now, in his defense, he had just heard himself, as he walked to the door. He was in shock. But I remember that moment. I remember hitting the floor and wailing and crying like any 12-year-old would do. But I remember that and just crying by myself for about 10 minutes. So I know what it's like to be an orphan. I know what it's like to wonder who's going to take care of us, what's going to happen to us, are we going to stay together? I mean, I just, but I also know what it's like to be rescued, because 3 months before the accident, my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, my mom's sister and husband, they changed their wills. Then if anything would happen to one of the families, the other family would take them. Excuse me. And they lived in a very nice suburb of Milwaukee called Brookfield. They were 33 years old. They just started a business a year earlier. They had 3 kids of their own, a 2-year-old, a 3rd grader, and a 5th grader. And they took all 5 of us in.
And what were your ages?
I had a sister who was 3 years old, a 5-year-old sister. I was 12, my brother was 13, and my other brother was 14. So their family went from a family of 5 to a family of 10 very quickly. And so, I mean, I know what it's like to have someone come up and say, we got you. We got you. It's may not always be pretty, but we got you. So back to the hallway in church, when Don tells me he doesn't want to break up the siblings, I mean, I'm the just right guy to say that to, because, I'm not going to sit there and say, are you sure? I mean, I'm sitting there. I remember very clearly. My first thought was, here's a man who's trusting God in a way that I envy. I mean, I want to have that kind of faith. And I looked at Don, I said, Don, by then we had adopted, our 5th child is adopted from China. And I knew it was going to be expensive. I said, how much is this going to run, Don? He said, well, they're telling us 70 or 80,000. Excuse me.
For 4 of them. Yeah.
I said, man, you got any idea how you're going to raise that money? He said, no. And I said, I think I got an idea. So Don and I, we recruited about 13 or 14 of our friends. We all sent letters out to everyone we could think of. And we said in the letter, would you sponsor me for the day while I work on this widow's house? All the money I raise is going to go towards the cost of this adoption. Miss Lucille will get free labor for the day. And we went out and we got all the supplies we needed donated by local merchants, because, I mean, everyone we talked to loved the idea. I mean, they said, yeah, dude, what do you need? And we spent the day working on her house. I mean, it was an unbelievable day. It was so much fun. And
so this is all the people that are trying to help your friend adopt 4 kids from Moldova.
Yeah.
But you're working on the house of a widow named Miss Lucille.
Yeah.
So she's getting everything on her house done by the people trying to adopt. And then everybody sends out the letters, and they're sponsoring you to work for the day to help the widow, and all the money goes towards the adoption.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like if you're sponsoring somebody to run a race, for the cure for cancer, you sponsor them $1 a mile or something. It's the same concept, only Miss Lucille got blessed. She was, right. It was amazing. And
and that's the piece that's so different than anything else, because it's not just we're playing around a golf and we're going to enjoy the day, but hey, will you pay us to play? We're going to be working and we're going to bless somebody else. And then in the meantime, it's also going to fund the project that we have going on, the adoption.
Yeah. And when it was all over, we'd raise a little over 70,000. I mean, I was expecting 10 or 15. We didn't know what was going to happen. And it just blew me away. I mean, I felt like we were on holy ground. And we were. I mean, it was widows and orphans. It was the apple of his eye. And we were serving them. And it was just, God, it was just so much fun. And about 6 months later, another buddy of mine came up to me and said, I heard what you did with Don. Would you help me? And I said, sure. So about a year later, we ended up doing another project, and they need to raise about 13,000. I think we raised about 12,000. But I mean, this lady, she lost her husband 7 months earlier in a car accident, and she had a fourth grader and an eighth grader.
Mhm.
And we put a new roof on her house, which was that's not a typical both hands project, by the way, just footnote.
Yeah.
But we had people who wanted to do it. We had the roof donated by a local construction company. And I remember standing on that roof, counting the people. I counted 54 people there that day. We had transformed the front of her yard, the back of her yard. We put a new roof on. And then I was just amazed at this team of people. And then I looked out on the street and I counted 19 cars. And I just thought, man, what a testament to the neighborhood. But it took me back to the farm about a month after the accident. I remember getting off the school bus, and my brothers, my older brothers, the 13 and 14-year-olds, we all stayed on the farm to finish the school year out. The accident happened in March of 1969. My little sisters, who were 3 and 5, they moved in with my aunt and uncle right away, to Milwaukee. My dad had a brother, Uncle Clifford, who was 63 years old. He lived with us. He couldn't farm by himself because there's like 380 acres. My dad had a sister who was a widow. She moved in with us. So she did the cooking and cleaning. My dad's brother and sister kind of took care of us for the rest of the school year and the rest of that summer. But so we finished the school year out there. And I remember it was about a month after the accident, getting off the bus. And our bus stop's about a half mile from the house. It's on a hill. You can see a lot of the farm. And I got off the bus. It was a beautiful April day, and there in our fields were all our neighbors.
Wow.
Their tractors and their plows and their discs and their planters, and they were planting our crops. And I remember them. It was Bob Grana and Leland Meyer, Everett Ellison, Ed Cooper, Doc Weimiller, Jack Melcher, Johnny Wolf. These are all my dad's buddies, taking care of their buddies' kids. They were planting our crops. And I know what it's like to have your feet washed. I know what it's like to be blessed in a way that there's no way you can repay it.
Right.
And the people who are giving you the blessing don't expect anything. They're just doing it because they know it's the thing to do. And standing on that roof, seeing those 19 cars, I just thought, this is living. This is what it ought to be. And that night, my wife and I went out to eat, and I kind of told her, I said, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. She was a stay-at-home homeschooling mom, 5 kids. And she, asked those questions like, well, have you thought about health insurance? Have you thought about maybe a paycheck? And I said, well, what would you think about going to work outside the home and maybe for a little while, and then while we get this thing going? And she really, part of the story, a good part of the story that I don't always tell, I can't tell all of it, but eventually she went to work at a college, went into development. And then in 2015, she was recruited to work for Concerned Women for America. She's the head of development. So now what she does is she raises money to help promote 7 biblical principles to stay in our legislation and to keep on the minds of representatives and senators and on the state, local, and national level. God has used her mightily in a way that she had never even thought about either. So anyway, she went to work about a month after that. I left, I left the company I started, and in August of 2008, we started Both Hands. And this is the best part. Now we've done 1,128 projects in 44 states. Just think about that number, 1,128 projects in 44 states. We've raised $14.9 million for families and organizations to use for adoption. And I should say 100% of that money that we raise goes to the cause. We don't take anything out for our operations. And we set that up, but it really does help eliminate all skepticism.
Right.
When someone's trying to recruit their team and their
Like,
friends
what
are
kind of
thinking,
house do you live in? Yeah.
well, then they just think, well, how much is the 501c3 making on this? How much goes to them? And they just say none of it, 100%. So, the onus is on us to raise our funds, and we have to do that because we have a staff, and you have to have a staff,
Right.
keep things going. But so far we haven't missed a payroll. God's been gracious. And we've got a lot of supporters who support us. And every year we do our own Both Hands project to raise funds for operations.
Oh, that's cool. So that's how I was just going to ask, how do you pay your staff? And how do you have an income? And how do you have insurance?
That's what we do.
You do one fundraiser a year, one project a year for yourselves.
Yeah. And over the years now, we've developed, a lot of people are fans because, I mean, this is really, I mean, I think it's just the most irresistible nonprofit in America because it's widows and orphans. and 100% of the money we raise goes to the cause. How do you beat that? And I just feel very fortunate that God would take a sinner like me and give me a chance to do something like this. You know, it's amazing. And it's a humbling experience is what it is. But yeah, over the years, we've developed a lot of fans. So we have monthly donors, and at the end of the year, around Christmas time, people are very generous, you know, and they just say, here, take this, just keep doing what you're doing. So that's what we do.
Wow.
But the story is how God can take something that's hard and painful and tragic and turn it into something eventually that's beautiful, you know, and you just never know. You never know.
Absolutely. You know, and that's why we speak at these adoption conferences too, because that's what adoption is. It's a heartbreak. It's a trauma from day one. Children aren't available for adoption if there isn't a trauma, if there isn't a huge loss. And so a lot of kids going into adoption, whether it's kinship or whether it's, you know, through social services or foster care or international or whatever the means of this adoption are, the kids come out of trauma. And so we're, you know, that's the whole message behind this podcast too, is we call it Broken and Brilliant. And it's the same thing. It's, you can be broken and you can still be brilliant. And, and God will take you from that broken place and shine his light through the broken parts and make something beautiful out of it.
Yes. Amen. And I just, you know, I was 52 when I started Both Hands. And I just felt like God was saying, JT, this is what it's all been about. Everything in your life up to this point has been in training for what you're about to do. This is what I've had in mind. And this is going to be fun. Just tee it up and swing. And boy, I tell you, I love it. I'm 65 now, and gee, it's still so much fun because we get to see families united. We get to see widows blessed, widows who thought that the whole world had forgotten about them. And then all of a sudden 20, 25 people come to their house and they just feel loved on. And it's just that spark, you know, that.
So how do you connect with the widows that need help? And how do you connect with the families that are trying to adopt, and how do you hook these two groups of people up?
Well, I coach all the projects. In fact, all 1,128 projects I've personally coached because that's what I do. And that's what I did for quite a while in my career, you know, was help people build teams and everything. So it comes pretty naturally, but I have coaching calls with all the families and I coach them on how to find a widow in their community. So that's how they have to find their own widow, because I can't tell them what to do. It's their project and they may feel confident building a new deck, but most people don't, you know, and you can't force, you know, they have to find the widow that's going to suit their needs for their team and what they think they're capable of. But we give them coaching on here's how you find the widows. And we've got the whole thing laid out as far as a toolkit. We've got an 81-step project manual toolkit that it's, I mean, we've been doing this for a while. We got this figured out. I mean, it's not a boy, I hope this works thing. It's proven it works.
And you don't have to figure it out every time. It's right there.
And last year, the average family raised about $23,000. So, I mean, it works. And the families find us either, a lot of adoption agencies know about us. They find us on Facebook, you know, friends, Facebook adoption groups,
right,
hear about us. And, you know, we partner with organizations like LifeSong, and, you know, a lot of people who give grants to adopting Christian organizations. They are very familiar with us too. So, you know, they're going to mention it. Home study, folks who do home studies, when a family says, how are we going to afford this?
Right.
You know, we like it when someone says, well, you might want to check into Both Hands.
Wow.
So that's how they hear about us.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. I want to, just before I forget to, I want to make sure that I show your book. So tell a little bit about your book.
Well, every time I would tell the story, and there's longer versions of this because it's just amazing how God does so many things. But whenever I would finish the talk, someone would always come up to me and say, "You should write a book." And so we did, and put the whole story together. And it was challenging, but it really does. Even as we put the book together, it just was obvious to me how God had just put so many layers in place, either that built my skill set, that prepared me emotionally, that built my emotional toughness, or whatever I had to do, to do it, but also the people that I met in the process, and how that it all just kind of came together. And that kind of that's all laid out in the book, just how my feelings about the importance of life, how that changed from when I was a high school, college student to when I deepened my faith and realized the truth. Things like that is what's in the book. And it's people besides my family have said it's a good book. Okay.
That's good. That's so funny. It's so funny because I wrote a book as well, and I had a lot of family members who didn't read my books. So, family's funny sometimes.
It's taken a while for my son, my kids to read it. I think the 3 out of 5 of them have now read it all. But so yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I understand. Do you have a favorite story, or one that maybe even a couple? What are some of the just amazing things that you've seen through the years with these 1,100 projects you've done?
There's several. I mean, when you ask that question, there's 3 or 4 that pop into my mind. I remember one, a family. In fact, it was a Nashville project we were working on, and because it was a Nashville project, and a friend of mine, I was kind of involved a little bit more than normal, but and I went to the project. But I remember this lady had lost her husband, and then her son had a gunshot accident in her garage. And it was just, this is a woman who was hurt, and she stopped going to church. And then before the project, we replaced that project had a lot of people, who knew what they were doing there, a lot of construction guys. We replaced, I think, 6 windows. We did some good stuff in her house. There's a whole lot of things we did. But so they were bringing supplies, and I remember at the beginning of the project, we were all gathered around, and this woman was saying, I just had forgotten about God, and seeing all these men show up with supplies. And as this week's gone on, I've just remembered God hasn't forgotten about me. And then she started going to church again. And I remember sitting around that circle. There was probably about 20 men. And then we were praying, and all you could hear was men going, and I thought, men, both hands, where men get together and cry, because these are men who were touched by their actions, and they actually saw this is the effect it was having on this widow who'd suffered some tragedies. And that's inspiring to me.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple stories where the widow actually came to know Christ through the project. One of my favorite ones is this family in California. They adopted, I think, from Ethiopia. This is early on, like in 2012 or 11. And the widow they served, they just developed such a strong relationship. She became like a grandmother. She was the grandmother to these kids, not just the one they adopted, but all of them. She was part of their family. They did another project. They were going to go abroad to get another child. And this widow helped with the project like a grandma would, and they served another widow. But when they went to get the child, the widow from the first project flew over with them. Gosh. That's the relationship. I just can't help but, think of God looking down on that and saying, well done to that family.
Yeah.
It's just, that's encouraging.
Well, and it's just doing so many things at one time. It's blessing every person who's involved in it. It's getting some practical needs met for somebody who can't meet them on their own. It's
Yes.
reminding them that they are loved and God sees them and there are people who
Yes.
will help. There's good in the
Yes.
world. It's helping fund an adoption and bringing a child into it's like, wow, it's not just one thing. It's all these things.
Yeah. And people have a chance to get their friends involved in the adoption process, and their friends can say, yeah, what do you need me to do? Send letters. Okay, I'll send letters and I'll work in the widow's house. And they all become part of that child's story.
Wow.
And they have a chance to give their life away. And it's interesting. We get so many notes from widows and families, and sometimes we get a note from a volunteer. I remember a couple of them, one of them saying, I've never done anything like this, and it's changed my life. He said, I've never given my life away and just served like this and seen this. He said, it was awesome. That's what's humbling about it,
Wow.
all because a buddy sent a letter back to me saying, I'd support you if you were working on a widow's house. I'm
You
so
took it and
thankful.
said, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
JT,
sticking up for him. Every year I send him a letter when we do our big project, and every year he sends the money in. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, wow. JT, what a story. And I just really support you in what you're doing. And, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, because I just thought there might be other people who don't know about you that maybe could hear about this and help other families that are looking to adopt, because it is so expensive, especially international adoption. It's all expensive. And, even if if the adoption itself is not expensive, it's expensive due to the medical and the mental health kinds of needs that these families all experience. And I was wondering, have you ever had a family that's reached out to you for that kind of help, for help in paying for treatment or
post adoption expenses? We have done a few post adoption projects. There's a limit to how many we can do, some IRS stuff, but we have done a few post adoption projects. Those are more challenging, because when you're anticipating the arrival of a child, your friends, they're all there. It's easy to get fired up.
When
the
things
child's
aren't
been with
going
you for
so
5
well.
when the child's been with you for 5 years, and then your friends go, well, what's so expensive? And people just, unless people really know, then most people don't have any idea how hard it is and how expensive it is. But
a lot of times many times those are the people watching my podcasts. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you have an uptick in some people reaching out for post-adoptive services as well, because, okay, now we've got the child home. We want the child to be able to remain home if possible. And sometimes it takes a lot of money to be able to do that. So,
Well, and we also we got several projects already this year. I think we've done 4 or 5 or something like that they're on the books or they've been happening, but just groups to do projects, like a Sunday school class that wants to serve, but no one's adopting, but they still love the concept of both hands. And they say, we want to serve. So we help them put together a project too. And they may raise money for, a group will do a project. They'll raise money for our Both Hands Fund. And that fund goes, any money we raise from those projects goes that we give grants to other families. Those are not projects we use for our operations. That's just more of a raise more money for families. And sometimes we do projects for like a company that wants to do a team building experience, and maybe they've got a special cause they want to raise money for. It could be an orphanage in some country, and they want to do a project. So, anything that, if it helps a child either in foster care, and we do projects in foster care. We got one going this weekend. They serve foster care families actually in the Nashville area, south of Nashville here, and they're doing a project. So we've learned to get flexible, but it's just, to me, it's just such an awesome fundraising model that because it gets it's a team building thing. It's fun, and a widow gets served. In the end,
Absolutely.
A widow gets served.
Absolutely. Well, I just love it. I love it. So is there anything else you can think of that you want to share before we close out today?
I just encourage people when they're going, I guess the lesson is, if you're going through something that's really difficult right now and it seems like there's no end to it and it's just hard and painful, God's going to use that pain, because our pain often becomes our passion. Our pain becomes our platform. And it may be a year, it may be many years. I mean, for me, the accident happened when I was 12. I started both hands when I was 52. That's 40 years difference.
And you can do math.
Well, I mean, there's biblical significance to the number 40. And someone pointed that out to me once, and I never thought about it that way. But it's like God said, this is what I've been preparing you for.
Took you 40 years.
Yeah. But that's just, so I just would encourage people in that. And if they want to do a both hands product, contact us at bothhands.org and we can help you get started.
Yeah, and I'll put the contact stuff at the bottom of the podcast as well.
Yeah.
So, well, JT, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love just being able to chat with you. And we'll go ahead and say goodbye on the podcast here. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me. It was a joy.